everyone should see a big picture with Alberta there with all those red pins for all the different schools. Now, first thing we got to talk about for all of this to make sense is the life cycle of the rainbow trout. At this point in time, you may have fish eggs, or you might even have some of those hatching to become Aliven. So those are the first two stages of life for our rainbow trout. Over the next 4 to 5 months, you will keep raising these fish into their fry stage of life. Now, in 4 to 5 months, that's not enough time for a rainbow trout to become an adult, so we won't make it to the adult stage in the FINS program. So there's the life cycle of the rainbow trout. I am now going to do a 180 here and throw a little question and see if we can use the chat box. What does a rainbow trout and a magpie have in common? Okay, so I just want to see you using the chat there. What do they have in common? Awesome, really good observations. Totally. So the first thing we're noticing is all of the colors. Yeah, so our magpie over here has wonderful blue, black, green, a little orange, lots of wonderful different colors. So does our adult rainbow trout. And the other thing you're noticing is laying eggs. So one thing that fish might do, an adult trout, when it is in that time of the year, when it's wanting to lay eggs, it's going to have really vibrant colors. A magpie might also have vibrant colors to attract a mate. And of course, both of these animals lay eggs. This is part of their life cycle. Now, big difference between the two of them. Of course, our magpie is laying eggs up in the trees in a nest made out of twigs, a real mess of twigs, really. And our trout is laying eggs underwater. A trout does make a nest, which is very, very cool. In the springtime, what'll happen, those colorful, wonderful rainbow trout will travel to their spawning grounds. So this is our first sort of fish word, spawn. To spawn, that's kind of like the breeding season for a trout. So they'll head to their spawning grounds, all those adult rainbow trout ready to lay eggs and whatnot. Okay, now our female trout, what she'll do is she'll start making a nest for her eggs. And of course, we're not using twigs under the water here with our fish. They are using rocks. So she'll lay on her side, she'll flap her tail and clean off a nice spot in a stream. She'll clean off those rocks and sort of make a little pit in the gravel for her eggs. Here's our next fish word, red. So you see that highlighted in bold letters, R-E-D-D. So this is the name for a nest that rainbow trout lay their eggs in, a red. So once she's got all of her about 1,500 eggs, so 1,500 eggs, she'll lay all those eggs in her red. And then she'll kind of, I guess, step aside, float aside, and there will be a male rainbow trout that will then spread his milt over top of the eggs. So the eggs have the female genetics, so that DNA from the female, and then the milt is that DNA from the male. Now that you have DNA from both parents, our eggs will be fertilized. Okay, and our female trout, she's going to cover them up with rocks so they're nice and well hidden. And rainbow trout do not care for their young at all. So once those eggs are laid out in the wild, our female rainbow trout says, see ya, swims away, good luck to all the kids. So 1,500 eggs for a wild trout. It's a lot of brothers and sisters. Let's have a little bit of a closer look at these little eggs. If you have them already in your classroom, some of them are still on your way, but if you have them in your classroom, you would have had a look at these already. They're a wonderful, teeny tiny round sphere, and they've got that fabulous orange color. Now you're seeing that orange color actually through the eggshell. The eggshell of a rainbow trout is clear. So when you see that orange, that is the inside, that is actually the fish. You may have also noticed two black dots on those fish eggs. Those are the eyeballs of our rainbow trout. So even when they're this little, you can look them straight in the eye, which is pretty neat. Wonderful. So these eggs in the wild get laid in the springtime. Okay, in the springtime in Alberta here, eggs will get laid in little streams. It's the middle of winter at the moment. So it begs the question, where did we get thousands and thousands of rainbow trout eggs in the middle of the winter? It's not the time of the year that our fish are spawning, not in the wild. On this map, you'll see these blue pins, okay? And two of these pins are called brood stations. I'll circle them here on my screen. We've got two brood stations. This top one is called the brood station. It's kind of near Caroline. And the one in the south is in the Crow's Nest Pass. Crow's Nest Pass. So these two brood stations are places that have adult trout that lay eggs. Okay. I will show you here. Ooh. One moment. Wonderful. So this is the Allison Creek Brood Station. This is the one in the Crow's Nest Pass. You can see the Crow's Nest Mountain up at the top. And if you were to go inside this building, what you would find are these big sort of pools of water. Okay, these green ones. There's some round ones here in the front of the picture, some kind of long ones in the back. In these pools are adult fish. So in Alberta, in this particular building, there is about 1,600 trout. Not all of them are rainbow trout, okay? There is also brown trout, tiger trout, brook trout, cutthroat trout, rainbow trout. These are all species that you will find swimming around in Alberta. So they've got all of these adult trout here in the building. Now, how do we convince these trout to lay eggs in the middle of the winter? We have to think about some comparisons here. How is spring different from winter? Well, one of the simplest ways to think about it is how much sunlight there is. In the springtime, there is a certain amount of sun that would shine into the water that the fish would see, okay? So more sunny in the springtime. In the winter, like right now, it's a lot darker, okay? This sunlight is really what triggers our rainbow trout to lay their eggs. Now, in this building that we showed before in the Crow's Nest Pass, the brood station, what they'll do is they'll shine a certain amount of light on the trout to trigger them to start producing eggs so they can lay those eggs. And then other times of the year, they might put tarps over top of those ponds to create shade, convincing the fish that it's more of that wintry time of the year. This is how we're able to get our eggs in the middle of the winter time. But I'm doing a lot of talking. I want to actually show you what it looks like in the brood station to collect fish eggs. And also a reminder, you can use the chat box as questions come up. Raquel is in the chat box there to answer all of your questions. All right, and the video does not have audio, so I can talk you through it a little bit. Here is the building again. See that lovely truck pulling up to it. And here we are inside of the building. So of course, adult trout are kept as a breeding stock. And we're seeing right now in the video, the fisheries technicians will get right into the water with those adult fish and pull out some of the adults. And they're going to put those adults in sort of a sedative, a bit of an aesthetic to calm down the fish, so they're not thrashing around and hurting themselves. Now we're seeing those fish technicians checking for maturity. So they'll sort of squeeze the belly, like you can see here, just gently squeezing the belly from the head of the fish down towards its tail to see if any little fish eggs pop out. And in this case, they were successful. They've got some fish that are ready to spawn, and we're seeing it happen right now in the video. We've got fish eggs coming out of the fish, and then that milked the sperm from the male fish that can be sort of mixed together to fertilize the eggs. Now, something to note in this setting, in the brood station, since the fish are so well taken care of, they're super healthy, we can actually get anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 eggs out of one female fish, which is pretty impressive. Since they're in this setting, we can get a lot more eggs. Awesome. So we're seeing them, they've fertilized the eggs. Now they're washing the eggs to keep them nice and healthy. It's really important that trout have super clear and clean water. Awesome. I'm going to pause the video now. I'm seeing a few questions in the chat box there. Oh, actually, it looks like Raquel answered it, wondering about cutthroat trout. Awesome. Wonderful. So in that video, you saw them spawning the fish. Now up on your slide, if you look to the left, you're seeing the eggs in incubation. So those big cylinders are filled with nice, fresh, bright orange fish eggs. When a fish egg is first laid, it's called a green egg. So it's really delicate. It's super squishy. If you were to hold a freshly laid fish egg and hold it between your fingers, it feels a lot like an Orbeez. So it's very delicate and squishy. It needs 2 weeks to strengthen. So over 2 weeks in the incubation there, the eggshell will get really hard. So the egg will feel a little bit more like a bead, and then you'll start seeing those 2 eyeballs on your egg. At this stage, we know that our eggs are strong enough to be packed and shipped to their next destination. And that's what you're seeing in the final picture on the right. Those cylinders, those tubes inside of the cooler have fish eggs. So again, there could be thousands of fish eggs in each of those tubes that you're seeing. And as an egg, when they're packed, all they really need is ice packs to stay chilly and wet foam. That is enough for those eggs to pull oxygen from the air into the egg, which is really impressive. Great, so now we've got the eggs all packed up, they're ready to go to the next destination. Their next place that they're heading to in Alberta is called a fish hatchery. I'm going to circle it again on here. I might use red this time. So the fish hatcheries in Alberta, there are 2 of them. Okay, there's one up here in the north. That is in Cold Lake. So I know we have schools from Cold Lake today. There is a fish hatchery up there. I'm sure you already know that. There is also a fish hatchery down here in the south in Calgary. That is where I am today. That's also where Raquel is, who's in the chat. So this is our next destination. Let's head on over to the Sam Livingston Fish Hatchery. I'm in this building right now. Our eggs arrive in their coolers and they will head straight into this room that you see up on your screen. This is called the incubation room. It's kind of like the nursery for the fish. This is where we're going to have the eggs and the Aliven, the first 2 stages of our trout's life. So here they are, they arrive in the room. The very first thing that we need to do is check the temperature of the eggs. Our rainbow trout like really cold water, right? You have to remember that they're coming from lakes, rivers in Alberta. It can be pretty chilly. So typically we see our eggs between 8 and 12 degrees Celsius, really cold. So once the temperature is checked, the eggs do need to be sort of cleaned off to make sure there's no viruses or, germs on the eggs. That's what you're seeing in the picture. It's actually a bath with iodine in it to kill anything that we don't want around. So that's the first step, just kind of getting the eggs into the room. Then those eggs will head onto the shelves that you sort of see in the middle of the picture there. I suppose I can draw that a little bit for you. So at the back of the room here, we're seeing all of these shelves, okay? So this room can actually hold about 1 million eggs at a time, which is pretty crazy. We don't usually have 1 million eggs at one time in here, but we could if we ever needed to. Okay, so let's see take a little closer look there. So all of those shelves have trays. And then in each of those trays is, thousands of trout eggs. And for those eggs to be well taken care of and healthy, they need that clean, clear water. So they have that chilly water running over top of the eggs at all times, keeps them cool. It also provides them with oxygen. This is something very important for trout, is that they do need oxygen to survive, even in that egg stage of life. And this is where your eggs will be until they're ready to head to your schools, really. So right now in our building, there is still a couple thousand eggs who are waiting in this room to be shipped and packed to schools. And this is what the packing process looks like. So our Fins team, myself and Raquel, you'll see Erin in the picture here, we have been packing your eggs to send to your schools. And it's a pretty simple process, actually. We'll count out your 65 eggs like you see in that picture with a little spoon or a fork or something, pack them into their teeny tiny cylinder and put them into a thermos. Now, again, for our fish to be healthy, we need the good temperature, nice and chilly, so about 6 degrees Celsius, and oxygen. So we put a bunch of bubbles, oxygen bubbles in the thermos for your fish eggs, pack them up, and they're ready to go. Oh, I see a question in the chat. Would the iodine hurt the delicate eggs? Good question. So iodine is fine for the eggs, especially when they're in that eyed egg stage and their eggshell is nice and hard. Oh, and another question, do the eggs get harmed? They do not. So when we're packing your eggs, there is a window of time when the eggshell is the hardest. So it's about, if anyone's into their accumulated thermal units yet, their ATUs, 240 ATUs is usually when our eggs travel from the brood station to the fish hatchery. Okay, so they can be packed in a truck, they can jostle around a bit, and they're still strong. Now, it's very important, kind of as soon as we're getting the eggs into this building that you see in the picture, that we pack them up and send them to your school. So there's a window of time where that eggshell is nice and sturdy right before the eggs hatch. So it's just hitting that good timing. Good question. All right, so once that timing is happening, when those eggshells are really sturdy and the egg can survive a trip across the province, okay, we're ready for the next destination, which is the school. All right. So all those little pins, like I was saying earlier, are many of the schools that are getting fish eggs this year. And here we are, the classroom. Wonderful. Ooh, I'm just going to back it up. I saw one question there. How many eggs in a thermos? So there would be, we do pack about 65 eggs in a thermos, because 65 eggs is, about as many fish as you can fit comfortably in your aquarium tank in your classroom. So everyone will have an aquarium sort of similar to what you're seeing on your picture here. And this is where your fish are going to be staying for the next 4 to 5 months. So let's move into the part of the presentation when we talk about how we're taking care of these eggs. Okay. Oh, got a few questions popping up. Okay, I'm going to skip over to here. Basic needs. So the first thing that you have to think about with your aquarium is trying to meet those basic needs that the fish would have in the wild. Okay, so shelter and space. Like I was saying, 65 eggs is about, or 65 fish is about how many fish you can fit in your tank there that they can swim around comfortably later in life. Okay, so we've got that taken care of. It's also really important that your fish tank is kind of shady. It's going to need to be sort of dark and shady, like it would be in that stream in the wild, maybe with plants throwing shade into the water. Of course, water is also a basic need of our fish, of course. Fish do drink water a little bit. They need cold water, like I've been talking about. So your chiller unit that you have with your aquarium will make that water nice and cold. And of course, they also need oxygen. I've been talking about that a lot too. So you have an aerator at the top of your aquarium that's kind of creating bubbles and putting oxygen into the water. Even our eggs need oxygen. Lastly, food, okay? Eggs you don't need to feed, right? So we've got our egg here at the egg stage of life. That's probably what they look like in your aquarium right now, or will look like as soon as you get them here later this week. So you've got your nice fish eggs. Bright orange is good. White is not good, okay? So a healthy fish egg is orange. A fish egg that might be dead is actually a creamy sort of white color. Okay, I've already had a little bit of this happening in my fish tank here at Bow Habitat Station. White could be a dead egg. White could also be something called saprolegnia fungus. So I had a bit of this going on upstairs. It's a fungus that is natural to the water of Alberta. Okay, but this fungus uses up oxygen, and this fungus can spread. So as this fungus spreads and grows on your fish eggs, it'll kind of choke them out. It'll stop the fish eggs from getting oxygen. Someone asked here when you, oh, Raquel answered that question, sorry. It's really important with your fish eggs to make sure you get rid of anything with fungus or anything that looks sort of white from your tank so it doesn't spread. And really with your fish eggs, as long as you're keeping the fungus at bay and providing a good habitat in your aquarium, it's really about waiting for those fish eggs to hatch. Oh, yeah, my eyes are going over to the chat again here. Another question about temperature. Let's talk about that a little bit. So at a lower temperature, more around the 8-degree area, our fish are going to mature slower. So it'll be slower for them to grow when it's cold. At the upper end, 12 degrees, those fish will grow a little bit faster. Okay, if you're going outside of that range of 8 to 12 degrees Celsius, that's no longer an ideal sort of temperature range for your fish. You might see more deaths if you're going outside of that 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. Okay, so I think I answered that question there. Okay, so we're taking care of the eggs. Again, temperature is super important. I want to show you a bit of a close-up of what it looks like for eggs to hatch. Again, this doesn't have any audio, but I'll just let you enjoy it. Awesome. Such a fun little video there. So our Aliven, it's really kind of cool. They'll sort of just pop out of their little eggshell like you saw in the video. Now, they'll kind of squirm a little bit. They'll pop out of their eggshell. It is important to take that eggshell out of the water so it doesn't sort of rot in your fish tank, okay? I know the eggshells are clear, so they might be hard to see, but try to get those eggshells out of the water. So all you have in your little incubation basket are the Aliven. And in that video there, it was super cool to see the close-up of the Aliven. You could really in detail see their bodies. And Aliven, they look a little bit like a tadpole here, and they should have a yolk sac, okay? So they should have this big orange belly. That is their yolk sac, and it has all of the energy, all of the food and nutrients that the fish needs to survive for about 2 weeks of life. If something happened when it was hatching that maybe that yolk sac stayed in the fish egg, your Aliven would not survive. Okay, so if you're just seeing kind of a weird, clear little body with no yolk sac, that fish won't survive. Here's the thing though, as your fish is growing, they are absorbing that yolk sac. So the yolk sac will naturally get smaller over time, okay, as they're using up all of those nutrients, okay? So the yolk sac gets smaller. As the yolk sac gets smaller, the fish's body is going to grow. In the Aliven stage, like you're seeing in the video, they've got sort of a clear body. They have their fins, but their fins are really tiny, not super good for swimming at this point. You'll see them sort of just wriggling around at the bottom of the incubation basket there. And you can also see, if you look really close, their gills. So even as an Aliven, they're starting to take water in through their mouth, okay? And they'll push that water past their gills. As they're doing this, the oxygen is going to get trapped in their little gill filaments so they can breathe. The other thing, as far as characteristics go with our Aliven, they do have those wonderful, humongous eyes on the side of their head, which is pretty fun. Let's talk about caring for your Aliven. This is a really cool stage of life for the fish, in my opinion. They will stay in your incubation basket at this stage of life, and that's to keep them safe. If you release your Aliven too soon, they could burrow into the gravel and sort of get trapped and lost in your gravel. So really do make sure you're keeping them in your incubation basket. In the wild, in this stage of life, it is very natural that an Aliven would want to hide. Okay, they're very small, they're very good food for other creatures. So they're trying in the wild to hide under little nooks and crannies, under rocks and logs. In our aquariums, to make them comfortable, we do need to make sure it is dark for them, so it feels like they're hiding. That's why we put kind of a cover over top of the aquarium and cover up all sides of the aquarium as well. Now, as they're absorbing their yolk sac, you're going to see a behavior change. These Aliven are going to kind of start moving away from sitting on the bottom of your incubation basket. The behavior of them swimming up to the surface of the water is very well called swim up. So when about 75% of your Aliven are behaving in this way of swimming to the surface of the water, that means they're starting to have that behavior of, oh, okay, I need to start looking for food. I don't have any yolk sac left. Of course, as we're going through the program, the fins team will let you know when you should start looking for this behavior. Because as this behavior is happening, your fish are moving into their next stage of life, which is the fry stage. Now our fish are looking a lot more like fish. There's no more yolk sac. You can really see those 8 fins a lot more clearly. The other significant thing you see with your fry is more coloration, kind of more coloration on their scales. This one right here that we're looking at has these sort of dark marks all along the side of its body. These are called parr marks, P-A-R-R, so another specific fish word. Any trout, not just rainbow trout, but any trout in this stage of life will have parr marks. Okay, ooh. Oh, I gotta get rid of these lines that I drew. Great, there we go. So they've got those parr marks. Now, a big change in behavior that you're seeing in the fry stage of life is now our fry need to eat food. Okay, they're actively swimming around. You'll see them swimming around in your tank. They're going to the surface. They need food to eat. If they were in the wild, our fry would be eating a lot of invertebrates, a lot of different insects. Of course, we are not going out and feeding a bunch of bugs to our fins fish, okay? We have fish food for that. So your teachers, they should have gotten a box with 3 different sizes of fish food. Since rainbow trout swallow their food whole, we need different sizes of fish food for the different size of the fry. When they're super teeny tiny, their fish food is really fine. It's super, super tiny, almost like flour. As they get bigger, those fish pellets are also going to get bigger. Now, inside of this fish food is ground up fish and fish oil because our rainbow trout are carnivores. Great. Oh, man, lots to talk about here. So our fry, this was the stage of life that your fish will be in for the longest period of time. Okay, so they're eating a lot of food, they're growing. With all this food eating, it means there's going to be a lot of pooping. There's going to be a ton of fish poop floating around in there. We don't want that though. We've learned that our water needs to be very clean, very clear. So when our fish are starting to poop more, that's where it's going to get really important to monitor your water quality. So now we get to do some fun tests at this stage. You get to do maybe pH test to see if your water is more acidic or more basic. You get to test for ammonia. Ammonia is like a chemical that you find in the fish poop, okay? So you're kind of at this stage of life going to be taking care of your water. If you're noticing that it's getting murky or, the pH is all off, the ammonia is all off, you're going to actually do what we call a water change. So that is just the process of taking old, dirty water out and putting fresh, clean water in for your fish. Great. So those are the biggest things for your fry, okay? So we're talking about water quality and feeding them. Now, throughout this whole process of going through the egg, Aliven, and fry, if you're noticing that any of your fish are dying, it's really important that you take them out of your tank so they don't, sort of decompose within the water. Okay, folks, how we doing? A little check-in here. There's a lot of information. Do we have any questions about caring for the fish that I can answer before we move on to the next thing? Okay, all seems quiet in the chat box for now. All right, everyone. So as you're raising your fish here this year, definitely do kind of let us know how things are going. Our FINS team will be checking in with you along the way so we can track milestones and make sure everyone's doing okay with their fish. We also really love it when you do send us pictures of what you're doing so then we can share them and see what's going on across Alberta. Over the 4 to 5 months, you will be totally in charge of taking care of your fish. And in the springtime, this is the real kind of like the benefits of all your hard work and labor taking care of your fish, the fish release. This is the super cool part of the program. In your area, sort of where your town is, you have a local fish biologist. And that fish biologist, we will be talking to them and they will look around your area, see where your school is, see where your town is, and they will pick a water body for your fish to get released into. And when they're picking water bodies, they have to think about a few things, first of which is habitat. So rainbow trout, they are a fresh water fish. We have learned that they need cold water. They need clean water. It needs to be clear. And also the word connected is on the screen as well. The water body that I have up in the picture is a beaver pond. So you see the beaver dam in the middle. Beavers are actually really great at creating habitat for trout. So they'll create a nice little pond, dam up the pond. And this water, of course, it is nice and cold. It is also a really good habitat for bugs and maybe other smaller fish. So now I'm layering another thing on here. There needs to be food for your rainbow trout to eat. So your fish biologist will try to find that habitat that has good water, but also has food available for your rainbow trout. Another thing they would have to think about is other species of fish that are already living in the pond. if we're introducing rainbow trout into this pond, is it going to mesh well with the other species? We want to make sure it's a good match. So these are some of the big things that a fish biologist would think about: water, food availability, and other creatures, I guess, that could compete with your rainbow trout. On the day of, it's up to you. Once we give you your water body, it's up to your school and your teachers if you want to do a field trip, and you will actually put all your little rainbow trout in a cooler and you'll bring them out to the lake or pond. You see in these photos here that we had our rainbow trout in little baggies. Okay, so nice water in those baggies, and then you'll release them into the water. Before you release them into the water, again, double checking about the temperature, making sure it's safe and good for your rainbow trout, as well as oxygen. I do want to, just a little side note here, teachers, that oxygen tablet that you have in a baggie, there's only one of those, and you save that oxygen tablet for your release of your fish. So once you head out and release your rainbow trout into their water body, it is really up to them to keep surviving in their habitat. And we hope that all of the rainbow trout will survive and one day be maybe a fish big enough for you to catch. So this whole process that we're in right now of raising the fish and releasing the fish, we're doing one little part of a bigger picture. The fish hatchery that I'm at right now raises about 1 million fish every single year. They raise them just like we're going to raise them, and then they release them into a water body. Now, why are we going to all this effort of raising millions of fish and releasing them? It's all about sustainability. Okay, so us people, we like going out to water bodies, we like fishing for rainbow trout and eating them, but we don't want to be doing this so much that there aren't any rainbow trout left. That's where this whole, raising fish and releasing them comes into play. By adding fish into all of these lakes and ponds, we're creating a balance. We're trying to keep that balance between the fish that are swimming in the water and the people who are going out and enjoying the hobby of fishing. So sustainability is a big word to think about with this entire FINS program. How many schools are participating across the province? So this year we had enough room for 100 schools, which would mean about 6,500 eggs. I think a few schools, they didn't have the time to get all of their equipment that they needed to get. So I think we ended at about, I think it was 94 schools total. So all these little red pins that you see on the map right here are different communities who are raising fish over the school year.